Okay, say hi.
Hey, can you see
Okay.
me?
Yep, everybody can go sit down. Thank you. Okay. My topic is contraceptives throughout the ages. Contraception methods have been around through the ages, and it stands to reason since the average woman can conceive for about 40 plus years. Different methods in history have ranged from rituals, spiritual practices, and some rather bizarre methods. To this day, some of these methods would seem very silly to us and downright foolish. But without the medical knowledge to back it up, if they did something and it kind of worked, they would practice it. There are different types that have been recorded, like condoms, female barriers, oral and IU devices, many of which are still here today. My interest in this came about after me visiting my OBGYN and when I asked her what was available to me. And she cracked a joke. It was kind of an odd time for her to be cracking a joke, so I was a little uncomfortable. And her joke went something like this. I don't remember it verbatim, but she told me not to hold my breath and believe everything was going to be all right. And I know I gave her a look because then she looked at me and she said, I always get that punchline wrong. I'm only good at deliveries. Well, thanks a lot, Dr. Maleka. Folklore, myth, superstition, rituals, and herbs that have been thought to prevent pregnancy have been around for years. In ancient Greece, they believed that if you inserted something sweetly odorous into the vagina, you would promote pregnancy. And if you put in something that kind of stunk, you'd prevent it. Well, you can see how this method could have come about in being conceived. Several contraceptive plants have been mentioned by ancient Mediterranean writers in medieval Europe. Members of the carrot family, the rue, the willow were used. Women also used vaginal suppositories made out of cedar oil and cabbage leaves, and sometimes mandrake root. In Germany, women contraceptives included a form in a tea made from marjoram, thyme, parsley, and lavender. In ancient Rome, women wore amulets and necklaces that either helped them or prevented with fertility. It was believed that if a woman held her breath and jumped up and down 3 times after intercourse that she would not conceive. Well, Persian women thought that if they jumped backwards 9 to 7 times after sex, that they also wouldn't conceive. Now, these numbers were considered magical, 3, 7, and 9. Now, in those days, magic and witch labeling was very prevalent. So any woman who had the knowledge of herbs had to be very, very careful because she could have been persecuted against. Now, methods for men weren't any better. Can you imagine going home and telling your significant other that it was time for his elixir made out of ground up mule testicles? Ew. Or that he should go wash up with vinegar his privates? No, I don't think so. A more proven method was the flower Syphium, or Syphilium, and it was from the northern African region. This plant was so effective that in 300 years it was made extinct. You couldn't cultivate the plant or farm it. It just did not succeed that way. And you only needed such a tiny amount, like a pea size of its juice, once a month, and this would either terminate a pregnancy or prevent one. But now, the profits that were made from this plant were so significant that it was immortalized in several points. And there is a recipe from the Journal of Pharmaceutical Sciences in one of the handouts that I have. Hippocrates, an ancient Greek physician, wrote about mysterious potions that created temporary means of infertility. And Pope John the 21st wrote a book about the prevention of pregnancy and the possible termination of one. Throughout history, the church has been on both sides of prevention and contraceptives. But to this day, they will tell you that abstinence is the best way. Now, condoms have been around a very long time. They date back all the way to King Minos of Crete, who used the bladders of goats. And it wasn't until the 1700s that animal intestines were used and became more popular. But they were very popular and very expensive, so sadly to say they were reused and disease was spread. Now, how many people knew that the Goodyear Company made things other than tires? In the 1800s, vulcanization process was developed by Goodyear, and they made what we now call rubbers, hence the term they were made from rubber. It wasn't until 1930 that the latex version was created. Now, rings that are inserted are also called pessacaries, and they were usually treated with something. Another way of prevention was to create a barrier in the vaginal wall with something thick and viscous. In ancient Egypt, a scroll was found with a mummy that talked about the use of a ring inserted soaked in donkey's milk, and about a resin-type material used as a barrier. In the 1800s, pessacaries became the primary method of control for birth control. It was a combination of cocoa butter and quinine. Now, it's my understanding that if you have the wrong amount of quinine, it can be very dangerous to your heart and your health. IUDs have come a long way since Hippocrates' days. He used to have little hollow tubes filled with mutton fat that were inserted to the cervix to prevent pregnancy. I can't imagine that. Have you ever heard the phrase sterile as stones? That comes from rocks being inserted into the uterus to prevent pregnancy and create women who were sterile. The modern IUD was developed in about 1909 in Germany. More information on this can be found in an article called The Secret History of Birth Control. Oral contraceptives have been around for a long time as well. In ancient Greek mythology, Persephone ate only pomegranate seeds to prevent conception. Now, thank goodness for Margaret Sanger and Catherine McCormick, who created the synthetic hormones we now know as the pill. Another ancient Greek method was to stay out of the moonlight. They believed that the moonlight would prevent or promote fertility, and they also thought that would happen for crops as well. There's also been mention in history about visiting the graveyard of your dead female ancestors as a method of prevention. Well, let's think about that a little bit. How many people do you know want to go talk to their dead ancestors to have permission to have relations? I can see how this concept would work. And the book of Genesis talks about coitus interruptus, which is basically early withdrawal. There were also sea sponges that were used as a primary method by the Jewish women. Now, these sponges had to be soaked in something acidic, like lemon juice. They would tie a string on for easy withdrawal. Did you know that one time in history it was illegal to import, mail, or transport across state lines any kind of contraceptive? A law was put in place in 1873 called the Comstock Laws. And it wasn't until World War I when a judge from New York had the law lifted. And the reason he did is there was so much disease and things were so bad. He stated that contraceptives were devices and instruments for your good health. In 1982, the French created a pill that would end or terminate pregnancy if it was taken within several weeks of contraception. This pill was called RU486. It was only available in France, Sweden, and Britain for a short time. It was never allowed in the U.S. And the company that made it went out of business due to the anti-abortionists. So, some other forms of prevention that we have heard of to this day are the rhythm method, knowing the woman's cycle. But unfortunately, that's only about 25% effective. Now, things like Mirena, a vasectomy, the NuvaRing, and the pill are rated at a 99% effective rate. so says the U.S. State Department of Health and Human Services. But the only form that I know of that is 100% is still abstinence. And yeah, I don't want to think about visiting the dead to protect once again. Now I better understand what my OBGYN meant when she said be grateful for the time in which you live. I can't imagine believing in holding my breath, jumping up and down, using magical numbers, or wearing a rock on my neck as a means of prevention. Especially didn't like the idea of smelling herbs. However, I did find it fascinating that the church had so much influence on this very idea of contraception. I hope you too can appreciate the means of prevention. I hope you too can appreciate the means of prevention that are available to us today than those of ancient time. Also that you have an understanding of some of the folklore and history behind it. Remember, what's available to you now is much safer and healthier for you. And again, don't fall for any lines like, hold your breath and everything will be okay. Be aware of what's out there for you and yourself. Protect yourself and others. Thank you.